JEPA has been one of the most audacious AI concepts that you either first heard about it through how Yann LeCun said that LLMs are doomed, or through him flaming people online about JEPA. But if you don't really understand it, I don't really blame you. I think it is one of the most convoluted research topics that's just impossible to follow. Like for LLMs, we predict tokens. For image generation, we predict a less noisy image. But for JEPA, we are literally predicting a high dimensional representation in a learned latent space, and just trying to explain its goal is already too abstract in itself. To top that off, just imagine someone trying to explain the progress of JEPA. Oh, okay, so JEPA kind of went from using exponential moving average target networks to also exploring dimension constructive average target networks to also... What am I even saying? I probably just spammed a lot of words that probably doesn't even mean anything. So in today's video, I'll be breaking down the essence of JEPA, the current state of it, all without instantly drowning you in a bunch of technical terms. And before we dive into it, if you're running Claude Code, Codex, or Open Code in 2026, you have probably hit the same wall where the agent is strong, but the terminal experience could still somehow be better. If you find yourself juggling sessions, losing track of what's running where, or constantly copy pasting context, it may be worth it for you to look into Warp. They're rolling out features that turn it into a more cohesive, agentic focused development environment for the CLI tools you already use. Warp now has universal agent support, so you can run Claude Code, Codex, Open Code, and more side by side in one setup and actually manage them like a command center, with functions like vertical tabs that lets you monitor sessions with rich context at a glance, so you're not constantly clicking around just to remember which agent is doing what, along with directory view, git branch, and conversation statuses. And the CLI agent toolbar makes your workflow even more agent native. You get the controls you actually need without leaving the terminal, like attaching context, jumping into files, and reviewing what changed. On top of that, for code review, you can review the diffs, leave inline comments, and send that feedback straight into the running agent so it iterates immediately without you bouncing between tools, because you shouldn't have to rethink your setup every time you switch harnesses. So if you're ready to upgrade the place you run your coding agents, just like the 700,000 other developers running 1 million Claude Code and Codex sessions in Warp, check them out using the link down in the description, and thank you Warp for sponsoring this video. Anyways, to comprehend what JEPA, short for Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture, is doing, think of it like how LLM is predicting the next token, but JEPA is just predicting this thing called a view. A view is a transformation, masking, or partial observation of an input that preserves the underlying semantic state while hiding or removing some information. So let's say there's a cat sitting on a couch. You could observe an image, the left half of the image, the right half of the image, a zoomed in crop, a masked version of the image, a different camera angle of the same scene, a video, a different frame from the same video. All of these I just mentioned are views. Even though they are different sensory observations, their representations correspond approximately to the same underlying scene or world state. So the idea of a cat sitting on a couch can be captured in a high dimensional latent space with all kinds of sentences or images that show this idea will point to that spot in the latent space. Then in JEPA's training, one view is used as the context and another as the target. So instead of learning by reconstructing pixels or predicting a token, the model encodes both into latent embeddings and learns to predict the target embedding from the context embedding. JEPA's objective would then naturally encourage capturing what is shared and predictable across views while discarding unpredictable or irrelevant details. So theoretically, the benefits of being able to think in higher dimensions like the latent space should provide better incentives for the model to learn concepts or semantics clearly and consistently. As the problem of directly working with pixels or tokens is that the objective is full of entropy. For example, text variations that does not have a right answer while all meaning roughly the same thing, and lighting changes of background within an image that doesn't even matter, but the reconstruction error will always be full of noise. This results in the actual model having the need to accommodate for everything, even for things that are fundamentally unpredictable. But when you compress these views into a latent space, the target embedding will naturally remove all the noises and only contain this compressed abstraction and semantics. So when the predictor minimizes distance to the target embedding, it is encouraged to model only the stable structure between views, and the noise will not interfere, which is the culprit that makes the model predictions harder than it should. But apparently scale kind of solves that problem right now. As we can see now, more and more models are hitting the 1 trillion parameter number. But anyways, this shifts the learning focus for the model from what exactly are these pixels to what underlying factors explain both observations. However, this doesn't mean the model wouldn't be able to see pixels or text. But before that, a typical JEPA learning setup contains 3 components: a context encoder that takes the current context view like visible image blocks or text and produces an embedding, a target encoder that takes the target view like mask blocks or a future segment and produces the target embedding. This embedding represents what actually happens next or what is missing, but it is still within the same representation space. And lastly, a predictor component that bridges the two states, which is a representation of the current situation and a representation of the future or missing part. What this component does is that it takes the context embedding and tries to produce the target embedding, basically predicting the representation of the next or the missing observation. So there is no pixel reconstruction loss, there is no token cross entropy, the only objective is alignment in representation space. And over time, this encourages the encoder to represent object position, spatial configuration, motion dynamics, scene structure, physical relationships, and so much more, rather than just surface level statistics that are brute force to learn semantic relations at scale. Then at inference, the target encoder is typically not needed. What is then generally used is the trained context encoder, which now serves as a feature extractor or latent state estimator. And there are multiple ways to apply JEPA. One is representation extraction, where you feed an input like an image, video clip, etc. into the context encoder and obtain an embedding. And that embedding can be used for classification, retrieval, similarity search, or even downstream supervised fine-tuning. So in this setting, JEPA behaves like a foundational representation model. Two is latent prediction for world modeling, where if the predictor is incorporated, the model can take a current state embedding and predict the embedding of a future state. In video JEPA, for instance, this enables forecasting in latent space rather than in pixel space. And instead of predicting future frames, it predicts future latent states. This is computationally cheaper and focuses on semantic dynamics rather than texture, so you would save so much more money not needing to generate the extra visual tokens. 3 is planning in latent space, where the model can condition predictions based on actions, such as in robotics. So now you basically have two inputs. One is the context encoder, which observes the current scene and produces an embedding that represents the current latent state of the environment, and 2 is an embedding of the action being taken or considered by the robot. The predictor then takes the latent state together with the action embedding and predicts the embedding of future states. The key here is that no pixels are generated during planning, which means the system is essentially imagining possible outcomes internally before acting. So remember how in that video model where I talked about how AI video models might be used for world simulation? Well, with JEPA, you do not need to materialize anything into pixel space to simulate the world. So you're basically saving the compute for generating the pixels. So instead of generating the full video frames to predict the future, JEPA performs the simulation directly in latent space, where action sequences and state transitions are represented as embeddings. And because the computations happen in representation space rather than pixel space, this process is significantly more efficient while still capturing the underlying dynamics of the environment. But that is if JEPA works, because as great as JEPA sounds, compressing and operating in latent space is still much harder, as the model has to learn a representation that actually contains the right information about the world. If the embedding misses important variables like object position, velocity, or interaction constraints, then predicting future embeddings becomes meaningless. So the latent space must be consistent and predictable. If two very similar but slightly different states produce embeddings that are way too far away, then the predictor would not be able to learn the stable dynamics. On top of that, for more complicated JEPA applications, the latent space must be structured in a way that supports planning. The predictor needs to learn smooth transitions between states through conditional actions, so the changes in the latent state would make sense. So if the geometry of the embedding space is poorly structured, then the predicted trajectories would drift, accumulate errors, or stop corresponding to real-world outcomes. But the last and the most important thing for JEPA is the representation must be informative without collapsing. Since JEPA does not reconstruct pixels or have any inherent noise, nothing stops the encoder from outputting the same vector for every input, especially when there are two encoders used for JEPA, the context and the target encoder. So the model could discover a very easy shortcut. Instead of learning meaningful representations of the scene, both encoders could simply output the same constant embedding for everything. A cat, a car, or a building would all produce the exact same embedding. And now the predictor's job becomes very easy, because no matter what the context is, it would just output the same constant embedding, which will always match the target embedding. So the training loss becomes extremely small, but the model has learned absolutely nothing about the world, and everything looks identical in the latent space. This failure mode is called representation collapse, where the embedding space collapses into a single point with no useful information. But since it'll keep the loss very low, this would happen really easily. The first practical solution researchers used was is updating the target encoder with something called EMA, short for exponential moving average. So instead of letting both encoders learn freely and can instantly copy each other's behavior, the target encoder is updated very slowly. If the context encoder suddenly changes its representation, the target encoder does not immediately follow. It only moves gradually over time, acting like a delayed version of the context encoder. You can think of it like chasing a slowly moving target. And because the target encoder changes slowly, the system cannot instantly collapse to a constant embedding. The predictor has to keep adapting to a representation that keeps drifting forward. So in practice, only the context encoder is trained directly with gradients, while the target encoder is updated as a slow moving average of the context encoder's weights. So they basically will never match, which makes collapsing much harder and stabilizes training easily. So in the early experiments of JEPA, like iJEPA, where JEPA is applied to image generations, and VJEPA, where JEPA is applied to video generation, or even Dino, which is a self-supervised vision method for learning image representations without labels, they are all utilizing EMA. However, EMA is ultimately a training trick rather than a principled objective, as there does not exist a loss function for EMA which prevents it from being minimized directly. It is also heuristic based because stability depends on EMA schedules, weight sharing, and training dynamics, which can be fragile and require manual tuning. This is why later research still explored other methods for preventing representation collapse, with one major direction known as the InfoMax approach, which tries to ensure the representation itself contains information uniquely about the input. The idea of InfoMax first appeared in 1995 from Bell and Savnovsky, and the main idea is simple: a good representation should retain as much information about the input as possible. In other words, if you look at the representation produced by the model, you should still be able to tell something meaningful about what the original input was. The representation should not be throwing away the important signals and collapse everything into something trivial. Bell and Savnovsky formalized this by proposing that learning systems should maximize the mutual information between the input and the representation, which simply means the representation should preserve as much useful signal from the input as possible. This principle later became the foundation for many self-supervised learning methods, and it is one of the key ideas that influenced the approaches used in JEPA. So instead of stabilizing training with a slow-moving technique like EMA, these methods add regularization terms that force the embedding space to remain informative. There are two main ways researchers try to do this. The first is sample contrastive methods, where the model is encouraged to make embeddings of different samples distinct from one another. Methods like SimCLR, published in 2020 long before JEPA, work this way by creating two augmented views of the same image and training the model to recognize that they come from the same underlying sample. The model basically learns to pull the embeddings of those two views closer together while pushing embeddings of other images further apart. So if two inputs are just different views of the same object, their embeddings should land closer together in the representation space. But if they come from different images, the model should place them far apart. Over time, this forces the embedding space to organize itself so that similar things cluster together while unrelated samples spread apart, which helps prevent the representation from collapsing into a single point. But the downside of this approach is that it relies heavily on negative samples. So to properly separate representations, the model needs a large batch of other images to push away from. This means you often need very large batch sizes or memory banks, which makes training computationally expensive and harder to scale. So a second approach is dimension contrastive methods, which focus on the structure of the embedding itself rather than comparing it to different samples. Instead of pushing different samples apart, these methods try to ensure that each dimension of the representation captures different information about the input. You can think of it like making each coordinate in the representation describing a different aspect of the input, such as shape, position, texture, or motion. To encourage this, these methods add regularization terms to the loss that penalize redundancy between dimensions, basically enforcing diversity across dimensions, resulting in the embedding space remaining rich and informative without needing to explicitly push different samples apart. So techniques like Barlow twins and VIC-Reg implement this by measuring the correlation between embedding dimensions and penalizing the model if multiple dimensions start carrying the same signal. And this was already a big step forward because the model no longer needed large batches of negative samples to achieve the contrastive method. But these methods still relied on multiple loss terms and carefully balanced hyperparameters to keep the representation stable. And this is the latest bet that Yann LeCun is making, called LeJEPA, comes in. Released in November 2025, instead of simply decorrelating dimensions, LeJEPA takes a more direct approach where it constrains the overall geometry of the embedding space itself. It specifically encourages the embeddings to follow an isotropic Gaussian distribution, meaning the representation space spreads information evenly evenly across dimensions so no direction collapses or dominates. To not go too crazy on the math, imagine the embedding space as a cloud of points where every input becomes a point in this space, so if the model collapses, all points basically fall into one point, or it could also collapse into a thin line or a flat sheet because many dimensions stop carrying information. So what the LeJEPA does is it encourages the embeddings to follow an isotropic Gaussian distribution, which means the point cloud should look like a round ball in high dimensional space. So the variance should be similar across all dimensions. And interestingly, this simple geometric constraint turns out to work surprisingly well in practice. In their experiments, LeJEPA was able to train JEPA style models without relying on EMA while still avoiding collapse and learning strong representations. Despite using a simpler objective, it achieves competitive or better performance compared to earlier self-supervised methods, VIC-Reg, Barlow twins, and SimCLR on standard vision benchmarks, even achieving accuracy levels similar to Dino on ImageNet, which is state of the art. So if JEPA is this good, why is the LM field not using it? Well, JEPA works best when the data contains a lot of unpredictable low-level detail that doesn't really matter a lot, which images and videos are full of. Trying to predict those details directly is pretty wasteful, so like I mentioned earlier, JEPA solved this by predicting abstract representations instead of pixels. But language is very different. Text is already a symbolic and compressed representation of meaning. Words are discrete tokens that already removed most of the low-level noise found in sensory data. So when an LLM predicts the next token, it is already operating at a fairly high semantic level. In other words, the problem JEPA is designed to solve, which is removing unpredictable sensory noise from prediction, does not exist as strongly in text. And of course, autoregressive training works perfectly already. It's an objective that can provide high signal feedback to the model. And JEPA is probably not gonna be a better design to predict text, especially when languages have more constraints like word order, which is already implicitly defined in next token prediction. A really prominent direction of JEPA I've been seeing though is using it for medical imaging. There's this research called EchoJEPA, which applies the JEPA framework to echocardiography videos, which are basically ultrasound videos of the heart. But why is it potentially a perfect fit for medical imaging? Well, this is because many medical imaging modalities contain a huge amount of noise and artifact. For example, ultrasound images are full of things like speckle noise, sensor artifacts, inconsistent probe angles, machine-specific distortions, and more. So if a model is trained to reconstruct pixels, it ends up wasting a lot of capacity trying to model these random patterns that are not clinically meaningful. And doctors do not really care about the exact pixel pattern of the ultrasound image. What they care about are stable anatomical signals such as the size of the heart chambers, how the walls move during each beat, how valves open and close, which is the type of information JEPA tends to learn. So as JEPA encodes and predicts representations instead of pixels, unpredictable noise cannot be reliably predicted from the context. The model is therefore pushed to focus on the consistent structures and dynamics of the anatomy instead. So in EchoJEPA, the model learns to predict representations of future cardiac motion from earlier frames, which encourages it to encode things like heart geometry and motion patterns. Then instead of memorizing noisy ultrasound textures, the representation becomes so much more aligned with the actual physiological structure of the heart, which makes it useful for downstream tasks like diagnosis or measurement. This is why I think JEPA has the potential to become the dominant method in the medical field. So when Yann LeCun said LM is doomed, I low-key took it out of context. LM is only meant to work with languages due to how it is a symbolic system with a lot less noise. So if you want to truly scale beyond language, especially for research on natural or real-life data, he's got a point. So yeah, that's it for this video. And if you like how I explained the AI concepts today, you should definitely check out my latest project, IntuitiveAI.Academy, where it contains an intuitive explanation of modern LLMs from the ground up, ranging from LLM architectures, MOE, LoRa, to our latest chapters, reinforcement learning, where we cover how RL works and how it interacts with LLMs, literally published yesterday. With how challenging RL can be, we have also built interactive visualizations to help you better understand its logic. This website is a series where I break down AI topics intuitively because I genuinely think anyone could understand them no matter how difficult it may seem. So for those who want to get into the technical side of AI or LLMs, this should be the perfect place for you to dive into the technical parts without being intimidated by crazy looking maths. And right now, the early bird discount is nearly over, but you can still use the limited code early for 40% off a yearly plan. And thank you guys for watching. A big shout out to SpamMag, Chris LeDoux, Deagan, Robert Zawiasa, Marcelo Ferreria, Poof and Inu, DX Research Group, Alex, Midwest Maker, and many others that support me through Patreon or YouTube. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.